وكفى والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين جاهدوا فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Inshallah, before we begin our discussion, I'll just start with a little bit of a disclaimer, and maybe I'll give you the gist of the entire talk at the very onset. So first point to be very clear about is that there are scholars sitting in our presence. I am not one of those scholars, and my purpose in sitting here before you today is really just to partake of the gathering and to benefit from the presence of everyone that's here today. In addition, I feel very strongly, and I've shared this before, but I'll just remind everybody that this is one of the institutions, not in North America, in the entire world, that is doing the amazing and absolutely necessary work of deen. And when the organization asked me to attend, I felt very strongly that this was just an opportunity for me to be able to exhibit my support for the organization as a whole because of what they have done and inshallah what they'll continue to do. I know that earlier there was an announcement made to remind everybody that we're just here for a couple of days, and so we should try to remain in this gathering for that couple of days. I'll actually take that announcement one step further, and I'll give you a piece of advice that if you can heed that advice, inshallah, it will lead you to much benefit in this world and much benefit in the hereafter. And that is that you are going to leave this gathering in just a couple of days. But I would advise you to leave your hearts behind. Yes, physically you have to leave because that's the way life works. We change from one state to another. We go from break to work, from work to break, from school to vacation, from vacation to school. So too, have you joined this gathering and you'll be here for a limited amount of time. But what makes this gathering so valuable is the fact that you're going to be here for a limited amount of time. But that doesn't mean just because you physically left that you can't leave your hearts behind. We should attach our hearts to this institution. We should attach our hearts to the work of this institution. We should attach our hearts to the gathering of this institution. And it's the joining of the hearts that's going to allow our effort to succeed and to thrive. Every one of us has a piece of us in this game. Every one of us needs to put a piece of ourselves in this game. If the community unifies behind efforts such as this, physically, spiritually, financially, mentally, emotionally, then and only then will we be able to achieve our goal. And if we achieve our goal, we can look forward to greatness in this life, bounties in this life, and an enormous, enormous reward in the hereafter. So just a reminder to myself and to all of those that are present here today, yes, we've committed for this short period of time, but I'm reminding myself and all of us to commit much beyond that, to commit ourselves to the work of this institution, to commit ourselves to supporting this work and this institution, and to commit ourselves to the goals and aims of this institution and to assist in any way that we can. So with that said, we'll begin our discussion. What time do we end? 2:40? Okay, alhamdulillah, 2:40. Let me just start by reminding us of a very simple principle by which we live, but sometimes we don't necessarily fully appreciate. So tomorrow, sunrise is at approximately 5:19. and probably many of you before you go to bed at night will actually look at the timetable to determine when prayer time begins and ends the next morning. I'll ask you a simple question. How do you know that the sun is going to rise at 5:19 tomorrow? How do you know? Can any of you read the future? Do you have a crystal ball that's going to tell you that the sun is going to rise at 5:19 tomorrow? Nobody in this room knows the future. Nobody can be certain about the future. The reason that you have confidence that the sun is going to rise at 5:19 tomorrow, roughly, is because you rely on yesterday's observations to make conclusions about tomorrow. Listen very carefully, because this is a very important premise that we take for granted. We rely on yesterday's observations to make conclusions about tomorrow. Look, if I pick up this, if I drop this, what will happen? This water bottle will fall to the table, correct? I haven't dropped this water bottle. That's the future. How can you be so confident that when I let this water bottle go, that it's going to fall to the table? What allows you to be so confident? Where does our confidence come from? The confidence comes from the observation that this was valid yesterday. That I drop this, it falls. I drop it, it falls. I drop it, it falls. So I can make a conclusion. Mind you, there's a physics behind it. Put away the Newtonian physics for a moment. I can make a conclusion that the next time I drop this water bottle, that it's going to fall. So we rely, when we make decisions about life, when we engage with the world around us, when we interact in this domain of existence, we rely on measure, balance, and organization present in the universe to make decisions about how we're going to behave the next day. I can give you another example. If you have a headache, you might take an Advil. Who told you that that Advil that's in your hand is actually going to help your headache? That's the future. You cannot be confident that the exact Advil that's in your hand is going to benefit the exact headache in your head. No one's ever tested that premise. However, you know that every time you have a headache, you take an Advil, and generally speaking, your headache is alleviated when you take that Advil. So again, same principle here, which is that we rely on yesterday's observations in order to make decisions about tomorrow. And that's really important for us to appreciate, because it's this organization of the world that tells us so much about who we are and where we're headed. Again, it's the organization of this world. It's the fact that this world is ordered that allows us to make conclusions about who we are and where we're headed. Just look for a moment, I can give you so many examples, but just look for a moment at the perfect balance that exists in the universe concerning how we engage with the benefits of the sun and how we're able to see. Just think for a moment. In order for us to be able to see, how many components have to be present for sight to actually occur? Okay, number one, you need the sun. Right? The sun is shooting off photons, trillions and trillions. I mean, trillions is just trillions and trillions of photons. I'm just using this as an arbitrary measure of number. It's much more than that. Trillions and trillions of photons are being shot by the sun. Those travel through space. By the way, the distance is roughly 100 million miles. So those travel roughly 100 million miles. And they do so at the speed of light, which basically means they're traversing that space in about 10 minutes, 10 light minutes. And they reach the Earth. They enter into the atmosphere. They have the perfect wavelength that allows them to hit various particles. And they hit these particles, exciting the particles, shooting off electrons, which then the electrons then release this energy as they return back to their basal state, which then shoots off this energy, which allows us then to be able to see this cascade of beautiful light that's all around us. That's just one dimension. The sun has to be perfect. The particles have to be perfect. The wavelengths and the photons have to be perfect. On top of that, my eyes have to be perfectly balanced to be able to take in all of the energy generated by this system in such a way that I can actually see, and that system needs to absorb certain energy and release certain energy, which allows my eyes to be able to perceive all of these colors that are occurring. Now, I'll just give you a simple example. Now, again, I'm not speaking to the scholars, because the scholars actually should keep a notebook and correct me with all the mistakes that I'm making. And I tell my medical students the same thing. Keep the book open and correct me where I make a mistake at the end of class. So I know I'm making mistakes here, but I'm just simplifying this for you to be able to understand the magnificence of the circumstance that we find ourselves. Have any of you ever gone to or seen, probably you've seen at least somewhere, a fireworks show? So what happens in a fireworks show? They ignite the firework. You can, if you're looking really carefully in the darkness of the sky, you can appreciate that the firework is rising. You can actually see it. It's a very, very tiny little glow. It literally shoots up into the sky, and then eventually it explodes. And when it explodes, it releases all this beautiful light and all of this pomp, which then attracts a person's attention. So people line up for miles to watch these fireworks shows. People camp out all day to get a good spot to be able to watch that fireworks show. People are totally mesmerized, young to old, male, female. Doesn't matter the culture, doesn't matter the background, doesn't matter the language. People are mesmerized by this fireworks show. Now, I'll tell you that for the one who's thinking and reflecting, that you can look out this window right now and that you are just seeing the most amazing fireworks. Because what's happening is, from the sun, this tiny photon is being shot out. And just like a firework trails in the sky before it blows into its lights, that photon crosses across space, leaves space pitch dark, by the way. Notice that when you look in space, it's dark. All of the light's coming from the sun. The whole of space is dark. Comes into the atmosphere, hits the particles, blows up. Literally, you get this explosion, this firework explosion, which blows up to show us various colors and various lights. I mean, literally, at any given moment, you can pause all of existence, and it's just trillions and trillions of fireworks that are blowing in the sky, molecular fireworks that are these photons that are being released that allow you to look outside and look at those magnificent green trees, and at every moment you can appreciate they have a different dimension, a different show, a different magnificence about them. SubhanAllah. All of this universe is perfectly balanced. Everything in this universe is perfectly balanced. The sun is providing heat, it's providing energy. And many of you don't think about it. I mean, the heat's obvious and the light's obvious, but what you also don't appreciate is that the sun is just a ball of gas. The whole sun is just a ball of gas. What is holding that gas together that doesn't allow that gas to be able to dissipate all through the universe? There's a core of gravity, which is grabbing that gas. Now, that gravity is so perfectly balanced that it holds the sun in place, but at the same time, it holds every single planet in the solar system exactly where it should be, such that it's spinning around, orbiting, but it retains its orbit over billions and billions of years. Where did that balance come from? How is such balance present, except that it's, number one, pointing to something greater than us, pointing to something more magnificent than us, pointing to something that is beyond us, and at the same time, it is reminding us of the world in which we exist. These are ayat of Allah. These are signs of Allah. I mean, think about the sun from another perspective. We could have a discussion for hours on the sun, but just think about it from another perspective. All of energy comes from the sun. What happens? The sun's light, heat, energy comes to the earth. It hits plants. The base pyramid, or the base of the food pyramid, is established. You have then all of these different levels of the food chain. This eats this, and that eats that, and this eats this, and that eats that. Every time you take a certain amount of energy, you raise it to the next level of the chain, the next level of the chain, the next level of the chain, until eventually you come to the peak of the chain, which is human beings. All of this balance is present in the most perfect way. Now, just as an example, a counterexample, I remember, if you read back, I wasn't present at this time, but if you read back in history, in the 1950s, I'm a scientist, so in the end I have to go back to science, as you're kind of getting the hint here. In the 1950s, scientists did not want to study cancer. No scientist would ever think about studying cancer. Now, what was the problem? Why wouldn't they want to study cancer? Because science is dependent upon yesterday's observations to be relevant tomorrow. Meaning you need organization to study science. Science depends upon organization. It makes an observation and then implies that that observation is going to be true for every piece of that circumstance in the future. Just as a simple example, if I ask anybody in this room, any kid in this room, what's water? They say H2O. I ask, how do you know water is H2O? Because scientists have looked at water, and they said it's H2O. Have scientists looked at every single molecule of water on the planet to be able to ensure that every single one is H2O? No, of course not. There's no way they looked at every single molecule of water on the planet. They merely looked at some molecules of water on the planet. They count on the organization of the world around us to then inform them that because these are all H2O, the rest must also be H2O. This is what science is predicated on. So for this reason, in the 1950s, scientists did not want to study cancer. They didn't want to touch it because they said cancer is random. Cancer is chaos. How are we going to make any sense of cancer? So nobody wanted to study it. Decades passed, years and decades passed, until eventually in the 70s, some fringe scientists, I personally have met some of them, fringe scientists began to come up with the idea that even cancer is actually organized, balanced, and can reliably be studied. And eventually, what they eventually came to recognize and conclude that cancer is actually organized itself. So that you can actually take a cancer, you can study its DNA, you can understand where the mutations are, and I can tell you that in the next 100 years, the future of cancer is that every time somebody has a cancer, they'll put it in a machine, they'll sequence its DNA, they'll determine what the targetable, what they call quote-unquote druggable targets are, and then eventually they'll create drugs against those targets, and they'll be able to then treat cancer in that way. So what I'm trying to highlight here is that even what was seemingly chaos is organized. Even what was seemingly chaos is ordered. Even the complex nature of cancer is still an intricate, ordered dance of molecules that actually is controlled and falls under the rubric of all of the observations that we make of the universe surrounding us. And this is something that is very, very important. Now, mind you, that on occasion, you hear this term, which people will like to throw off very, very casually, which is that things somehow occur randomly. Things somehow occur randomly. For example, those of you who've studied evolution, I apologize if I speak over anyone's head here, but if you studied evolution, you understand that evolution, essentially what is claimed in evolution, is that there are a series of natural mutations which randomly occur, and these random mutations are then selected for by a process called natural selection, Darwin's natural selection. And that essentially natural selection allows for various mutations to thrive and others to be deleterious and deleted, so that you can then allow the genetic pool to be able to advance to respond to the environment in which it finds itself. Now, that depends. That whole theory depends on something called randomness. That there's random mutations, and there's this random process, which is called natural selection. But just think about it for a minute. Just put aside this randomness, because I'll just tell you that historically, everything that's claimed to be random is really just a sign of ignorance until eventually it's understood. Yesterday, cancer was random. Today, it's understood. Yesterday, apples would fall from trees randomly. Today, we have Newtonian physics explaining how apples fall from trees. Yesterday's particles would bump randomly, but now we understand that there's actually, the physical motions, physical constants and formulas that can explain all of this motion. So today's random mutation, who knows what that will be tomorrow. But just think about this for a second. You claim natural selection. There's a claim that natural selection is actually just selecting on all of these random mutations. But what is natural selection? You're telling me that there's this magical force out there that can so carefully select genomic abnormalities that it can determine which abnormalities should survive and which abnormalities should fail. It's so perfectly balanced that it doesn't delete the entire genome, but at the same time, it doesn't allow excess mutations to escape from its selective process. Where did that perfection come from? That's like voodoo. You're saying this magically occurs. There's a perfection, even in natural selection. Even natural selection is an intricate dance that perfectly selects based on the environment, allowing certain genetic variants to thrive and others to be deleted. It's not just any kind of magic that's occurring. It's perfectly ordered, perfectly balanced, allowing microevolution to occur based on the environmental circumstance that the organism finds itself in. So again, what we learn, and the simple summary that I want to make as point number 1 today, is that we live in an ordered, magnificent universe. And that this order and magnificence informs how we behave tomorrow. I make decisions about tomorrow based on what happened yesterday, using the confidence of the organized universe to know that tomorrow will be true. Now, we as Muslims, we actually take that one step further. We as Muslims, we take that one step further. We say, look at the organization and the order of the world around us. This organization and order of the world around us is not random. Now, I already addressed the topic of randomness. We could literally have a 3-hour conversation on randomness, but I've just basically touched on that topic. We say it's not random. We say there's a creator. That this is purposeful, that this is measured, that this is balanced, and that all of this has been placed and created in such a way that it is not in vain. Now, you and I can observe that, because every time when we study something, when we look at something, we see that it invariably has purpose. The system is all contingent. One thing is contingent on another thing is contingent on another, a fourth is contingent on a fifth, until you eventually have to escape. To escape this contingency is a whole other discussion, but eventually you come to a conclusion that there is something outside of this realm of contingency, which is the creator who's outside of the box of creation, which is Allah. And all of this is purposeful. It is all reminding us of an important responsibility that falls upon our shoulders. Look, this universe is not in vain. It's too organized. And it's totally serving one set of creation over all of the rest of creation. Now look at the distance, look at the differential that exists between humanity and all the rest of creation. I told you earlier, the sun is providing its energy, which creates this base of the pyramid, which then creates the next layer of the food chain, the next layer of the food chain, the next layer of the food chain, all to serve human beings. Human beings are writing history. Human beings are calculating vectors. Human beings are in control of the universe. They build buildings, and they advance science, and they develop technologies. No other organism on the planet is doing that. Human beings are communicating. They have language. Honestly, one of the greatest miracles of humanity is language. Human beings are writing and reading and communicating complex ideas and understanding and discussing. You don't find that in any other organism on the planet. Every perfection that surrounds us, the fireworks that are going off in the sky, the fact that my hand and I can control its movement, the fact that I can eat and I can take energy from all of the food that surrounds me, all of this is pointing to something far greater than myself. It's pointing to a reality that all of this has been created as a benefit for me and everything that serves me. Or otherwise stated, for humanity and everything that serves humanity. Or as the Quran states, مَتَاعًا لَكُمْ وَلِأَنْعَامِكُمْ. When it's talking about food as an example, that this is all a provision for you and for your animals. So the world around us is continuously providing a reminder that this whole universe is not in vain. It is not random, it is organized. It is not without purpose, it is purposeful. Which basically comes down to remind us in the end that there is a purpose for why we are here. And that purpose is to worship Allah, and the ultimate manifestation of that purpose will occur in the hereafter. And that's the theme. That's the theme of this weekend. For all of us to recognize and understand the reality of the hereafter that stands before us. Now, this is the ultimate reality. This one premise is the ultimate reality. Look, if I can look at the universe around me and I appreciate that all of this is organized, is ordered, and is here to serve me, then that allows me to conclude that this is not in vain. But once I recognize that this is not in vain, the next ultimate reality that should hit me is that this is not in vain. This is therefore going to be a test, which actually is going to have a result, which is the hereafter. Now, of course, we learn that through Revelation. We learn that through the messages of the messengers. This is a common theme that was spread through by all of the messengers. But it is something that we should never be in doubt of, because it fits with the reality that surrounds us. It fits with the reality that surrounds us. All of creation is perfect. All of creation is balanced. This creation has been created as a sign of Allah's mercy and is there to serve us. As a consequence of this creation, Revelation and the prophets tell me that I can conclude that this is just a test, and because this is a test, the ultimate reality, the eventual reality, lies in the hereafter. That's the simple premise that we're constantly reminded of in our deen. Now, by the way, these points that I just laid out, these points are the exact points that you reflect on dozens of times a day. These points are the same points that we reflect on dozens of times a day. What's the most common statements that we make being a Muslim throughout the day as part of our prayer? We constantly recite, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise is due to Allah, Lord of the universe. All praise is due to Allah. This is establishing a simple fact for us, that everything, all praise belongs to Allah, and we get one of the reasons why. Rabbil Alameen, He is the Lord of the universe. Lord of the universe, Lord means the one who creates, sustains, nurtures, and controls. And this is why all praise is due to Allah. Everything around me is a sign. The sun rises, it's a sign. The sun sets, it's a sign. The way the leaves are blowing on those trees out there is a sign. The fact that I can see all these beautiful colors in this masjid is a sign. The fact that I can move my hand, sign. When I eat, I can take in the beneficial and release the toxic, sign. Everything is a sign of the Lord of this universe. And why is all this present? Because He's Ar-Rahman and He's Ar-Rahim. He's the most beneficent, the most merciful, the one that's full of mercy, the one that distributes His mercy abundantly. And from there I can come to the next premise. Maliki Yawmiddin, Master of the Day of Judgment. Look how quickly the Quran takes you. You know, they say Surah Fatiha has the opening, correct? Surah Fatiha has the opening of the Quran. It's the opening of Salah. It's the opening of our deen. It contains all of the key ideas that are going to eventually arise in the Quran. It contains all of the key ideas that we predicate ourselves on as we go through our lives and we live our deen. Number one, look at the world around you. It is created by this Lord. And all praise is due to him. Number two, he is the magnificent, the merciful. Number three, he is the master of the day of judgment. Look how quickly the Quran takes you through this process to bring us to what matters. Now, that's so important because look, in life, the world is complex. You go out there in the world, there's 100 options. Do I do A? Do I do B? Do I choose C? Do I choose D? Do I meet with B? Do I meet with C? All of these choices are present before us. How am I going to make decisions? How am I going to inform myself about the best way to spend my time, the best way to spend my wealth, the best way to spend my youth? What is going to guide me? Am I going to go through Barnes and Nobles and read help book after help book? No. The one underlying premise is that this whole world is a test. That the perfection of this world is an indication of the permanence of the hereafter. Everything around me is a reminder that this is just but a test and that the ultimate reality lies in the test. Now that becomes important because look, I could succeed in this life, but it's a test, it doesn't matter. If it's a test, it doesn't matter if I have a big house or a small house or a nice car or an average car or a big bank balance or a lower bank balance. None of that matters. It doesn't inform me of the ultimate result. It merely informs me of my circumstance today. But the ultimate result is going to be based on a completely new paradigm. Success in this life doesn't mean success in the hereafter. They are two potentially different things. All of these things, all of this reality is informing me of that. So this is the fundamental three principles that we continuously remind ourselves of every time we pray. All praise is due to Allah, Lord of the universe. He is the beneficent, the merciful. He is master of the day that matters. Maliki Yawmiddin, the day of retribution, the day of recompense, the day that actually matters. And then based on that, you come to one fundamental conclusion. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. You alone do we worship, and you alone do we seek assistance from. And that's the premise of the entire Surah Fatiha. They say that the Quran rotates on Surah Fatiha, and all of Surah Fatiha rotates on this one line. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. You alone do we worship, and you alone do we seek assistance from. So this is the reminder that all of us should continuously go through every time we pray. And honestly, nowadays when anybody wants to remind you of something, they'll put up a billboard, right? If Apple wants to remind you about the beneficial nature of their camera on their phone, they put up a billboard, they take a picture, and they say shot on iPhone 10 or whatever number they're on now. When Procter & Gamble wants to remind you that you need to use Tide in order to make your clothes be fresh and clean, they'll put up a billboard, they show a picture of Tide, they show a person wearing nice, clean, fresh clothes. Your memory is triggered in our minds. I need to go out and make sure that I use Tide. Or when I go to the grocery store, I need to ensure that I purchase Tide. In the same way, or I would even say much greater, this entire universe is a billboard reminding us that all praise is due to Allah. Every single thing that occurs around us, every molecular interaction, every chemical reaction, every small or big event is merely just a sign of Allah. Look, I told you there's a fireworks show going on out there. These photons that are hitting these sky, clouds, leaves, ground, walls, these photons are coming from 100 million miles away. They're racing because they have no mass. They're racing at the speed of light. They arrive here in 10 light minutes. And they perfectly hit all of the different particles in the universe, explode with this magnificent rainbow of color, and our eyes are able to perceive it. Where did this come from? It's random? It's not possible that it's random. It's organized. I'm perfectly balanced. The sun is perfectly balanced. The earth is perfectly balanced. The atmosphere is perfectly balanced. All praise is due to Allah. Rabbil Alameen. The one who created all of this, sustains all of this, allows all of this to reach its pinnacle. And all of this is present as a sign and indication of his mercy. He is Ar-Rahman. Ar-Rahman, the one that's full of mercy. And he is Ar-Rahim, the one who distributes his mercy. And the conclusion that we come to, he's Maliki Yawmiddin. We're being reminded that he is the master of the day of judgment. Now, think about this for a moment. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in his magnificence, created this entire universe, such that, just as an example, because we talked about the sun earlier, just as an example, 1 million earths can fit in the sun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this entire universe in such a perfect and balanced way that no molecule moves except through the will of Allah. And this universe is such that the solar system that we live in is just a tiny speck in this magnificent, infinite universe. Then tell me, if this is the universe and Allah has created this universe to be disposable, meaning this whole universe will be dissolved, right? The future of this, what is the future end point of this universe? That it will crumble into dust, the horn will be blown. This entire magnificent universe that we are so awed by and enamored by will be completely rendered into dust. And the statement will be made, لِمَنِ الْمُلْكَ الْيَوْمِ. Now, when all of this universe has been rendered into dust, to whom belongs the dominion on that day? Lillah, for Allah. Al-Wahid, the one. Al-Qahhar, the dominator. That's the reality. This whole universe has been created as disposable. So if this is the reality and control that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has on the disposable universe, then I'm only forced to conclude that what will be the reality of that which has been created forever and permanent. Right? I mean, think about it for a minute. This whole universe is so meaningless that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is his disposable creation. This is what was created to be thrown away one day. This was what was created as just a game, as a test. Then what will be the reality of the hereafter which has been created purposely to be permanent, purposely to reward those who do good, and to potentially punish those who go astray? If I'm afraid of the heat of the sun today, then I should be shaking with the potential heat of Jahannam tomorrow. If I'm excited about the possibility of going out and having pizza today, then I should be thriving to taste the food of Jannah tomorrow. That's the reality of who we are. It's just a board game. It's all going to be folded up. Doesn't matter who wins and loses. It matters how we play the game. All of us will be judged based on how we play this game. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who controls every molecule in such a way that there is no molecule that is moving out in disarray. There is no example of chaos in this universe that we see around us today. Then what will be the state when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings everything under his dominion so that it will be judged on that final day? My brothers and sisters, none of us can escape from the reality of the world that surrounds us. The perfection of this world only points to the ultimate perfection of the hereafter. The dominion and control exhibited by Allah in this world is only a reminder for us of the ultimate control of the hereafter, where he will be Maliki Yawmiddin. And if we're driven to avoid things that harm us in this world, and to pursue and chase the things that seemingly provide us benefit in this world, then we should take that energy and we should channel it to see the reality of the hereafter and to do everything in our power to save ourselves from the hellfire and to save every single person that we engage with from that same potential punishment that lies ahead. And in the same way that we have a desire to amass the goods of this world, to taste the foods of this life, to enjoy the company of one another. We should leverage that power, that desire, that energy, and guide it towards the permanence of the hereafter. Yes, I want to live in a big house, but I want that big house to be in Jannah. Yes, I want to taste of the ultimate taste of all of the great foods, but I want that taste in the hereafter, which is permanent. Yes, I want comfort. I want to sit back on a couch. I want to relax, but I want that to be permanent in the hereafter. Human beings are all chasing the same thing. There's no difference between me and you and everybody out there. Everybody wants creature comforts. Everybody wants good company. Everybody wants wealth. Everybody wants comfort. The only question, do we want it today? Or do we want to wait 5 minutes and have it tomorrow? That's the only question. We're all driven to do the same things. We all desire the same things. Look, you have children. There's some children sitting here. I've had younger children. You know, you tell a child that they ask you for something, you say, wait 5 minutes. Right? You say, wait 5 minutes. Why do you tell them to wait 5 minutes? Because you want them to be patient, because there'll be something better for them. For example, you tell your children, you know, you got to go to high school. You got to go to college. Why do you have to go to high school and college? So you can learn, so that you'll be able to make yourself more successful in what comes ahead. So if the child says to you, I don't want to go to high school. I don't want to go to college. I don't want to study. I just want to go out and pursue my dreams. You say it's a big mistake. Take that few years. It's a very short period of time. Trust me, I'm 60. I know. I'm 50. I know. Take that few years. Use it wisely. You'll benefit for the rest of your life. What's the difference? We say the same thing. The messengers did not come to tell us and take us away from anything that we desire. The messengers want us to have everything that we desire. But they want it in the permanent hereafter, not in the passing world in which we exist. That's the only distinction. Doesn't Allah promise us big homes in Jannah? Doesn't Allah promise us companionship in the hereafter? Doesn't Allah promise us food and drink, which will be far beyond what we could ever imagine? All the things that you and I pursue, all the things that we inherently desire and pursue. The only question is, are we going to wait? This life comes and goes. Look, I mean, it's so obvious. Ask yourself a simple question. What's the consequence of everything that exists here today? Here, I'll give you a couple guarantees. I'll tell everybody what your end result is in 100 years. 100 years from now, except maybe a few kids in this room, every one of you are going to be thrown in the grave. Every one of you are going to be thrown in a grave. In fact, I'll tell you a story. There was a famous Shaykh. He was sitting, I'm not going to go into the full details here because I have just a couple minutes left. He was sitting in between a garbage dump and a graveyard. He's sitting in between a garbage dump and a graveyard. Somebody comes and asks him, what are you doing? He said, I'm sitting where everything ends. I'm sitting where everything ends. Because all people end up in the grave and all things end up in the garbage. It's exactly the case. Today, the home that you build, you spend so much time, you say, I'm going to build this home. Here's my plan. Look at this beautiful home. Look at the architecture. Look at the design. Look how comfortable I'm going to be. Look how beautifully it's organized. I guarantee you, 100 years from now, 150 years from now, somebody will come in that home and say, tear down. Tear down. This is a 100-year-old home. These people used to live like this. Tear this whole thing down and build me a new one. Everything in this universe ends up the same way. 90% of what we buy ends up in the garbage within a year. And the other 10% eventually ends up in the garbage in our lifetime. And if not, when we're done, the kids come afterwards and throw everything in the dumpster anyway. Maybe they hang on to a few things for memories. Their own kids will throw those things away. You have two end consequences of this world that we put so much stock in. We end up in the grave and our things end up in the garbage. Now compare that to the permanence of the hereafter. We end up in infinite joy and pleasure, and our things will be infinitely available for us to enjoy. There's no comparison. The only thing that's blinding us is the passing nature of this world and the labyrinth of multiplicity that it creates that confuses us. Right? That's the nature of a test. The test is such that it has these veils, that they're not readily apparent. It's not easy to see through. But there's all these veils that surround us. The beauty of our deen, it teaches us that the veils are the veils. That when you look at the sky, think of Allah. When you look at the ground, think of Allah. When you take food, think of Allah. When you live in your homes, thank Allah. Recognize that all of this perfection in this world, this disposable world, is only there as a sign to remind us that there is only Allah. Lillahi al-wahid liman al-mulk al-yawm. Lillahi al-wahid al-qahhar. That's the reality of our existence. If we've deceived ourselves or the world has deceived us into thinking otherwise, it will be a great source of regret for us. It behooves us to ask simple questions. Where did I come from? Where am I headed? What have I done with my time? What did I do with my wealth? How did I use my energy? Where did I invest my desires? These are all common, challenging questions that we should ask ourselves. Now, we can chase the passing nature of this world. We'll never catch it. It's all meant to be destroyed. We're going to end up in the grave. It's going to end up in the garbage. Or we can take heed of what the messengers brought and the message that they highlighted. That this whole world, that this box which we're trapped in, which is called creation, it will come and go. And even more real, you will come and go faster than it passes. None of us are here permanently. We've all been placed here for a very short period of time. No human being in the history of this world has ever lived beyond their age. And all the things that they thought were the great pursuits of that time all ended up in the garbage. The only reality of this world is that it is passing. It is merely a test. We should awaken to this reality. Refocus ourselves on the hereafter. Use the time that we've been given to strive for the pleasure of our Lord. Use the wealth that we've been given to invest in the things that matter. Use the energy and desires that we have in order to further the cause of deen. That will result in success in the hereafter. And that's what the ultimate hereafter is all about. We worship Allah and worship Allah alone. And we turn to Him and we turn to Him alone. And we're not deceived by this maze of multiplicity. We see that instead, everything that's around us is only a sign that points to the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. And it should hearken and awaken us to this ultimate reality of who we are and where we hope to be. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst those who are able to appreciate all of the magnificent signs that He's placed around us. And may He make us amongst those who are able to be literate of those signs and to take the ultimate message, which is that He and He alone has created this entire universe and is Rabbil Alameen. May He make us amongst those who are able to appreciate the magnificence of His mercy and the vast distributive nature that exists in His mercy and how it surrounds us. May He make us amongst those who are able to appreciate the reality and the passing nature of this world, but the permanence and the importance of the hereafter. And may He make us amongst those who turn to Him and turn to Him alone in all forms of worship and in all forms of seeking assistance. And may He make us amongst those who invest every single bounty that He has bestowed upon us for the pursuit of the hereafter, so that we can earn His pleasure in this world and the next, and so that we can earn the ultimate reward that He has created and preserved permanently for all of those who seek Him and who raise His great name. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you for coming today. May He allow you to be able to achieve the goals that you had in your hearts and minds when you sought to make this journey here. May He allow this institution to be able to thrive and achieve all of its goals. May He send it assistance from every direction, both seen and unseen. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be able to gel our hearts and unify our hearts in the mission of this organization so that we can all become contributors to something that will be lasting for us in both this life and the next. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.